Thank you for joining us. I'm Scott Drucker, Chief Executive Officer with the Arizona Association of Realtors, and this is Shelley Ostrowski, our 2024 State President. And today we have the pleasure and honor of being joined by the National Association of Realtors President, Kevin Sears. Kevin, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
I really appreciate you coming all the way to Arizona to talk to us today about this important subject, so thank you.
It's my pleasure to be with the Arizona Realtors.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we want to start by asking you how this settlement benefits NAR members.
Yeah, so the proposed settlement benefits NAR members and Arizona Realtors because it hopefully will give us some finality to the sell side commission lawsuits. The motion has been filed for preliminary approval, but we're looking at probably 6 or 7 months before the judge would make a decision if the settlement is approved with final approval. And so just knowing that we can have the lawsuit in the rearview mirror, I think that's a huge benefit for the members. They can focus on business at hand, and that's getting more listings, increasing the inventory, and just being able to get back to doing their jobs.
And I guess that kind of dovetails into my question, which is a lot of independent legal experts thought that the National Association of Realtors in this Sitzer-Burnett case had very strong grounds for an appeal, that there were maybe some fundamental errors at the trial court level. Yet NAR did make the decision to pursue settlement as opposed to an appeal. What was the reason for that decision?
Yeah, so we did feel that we would have a very good chance on appeal. And if we were successful on appeal, it would be years down the road, and it would likely be remanded back to the lower court for another jury trial. So, so the issue that would happen during the appeal period is that all the copycat suits would continue on and for the years, and so it would cost the local and the state associations named, the brokerages named, and there were even some individual members and teams that were named. They would have to continue to defend those cases as we were appealing this. And then the final thing is that the initial settlement was for $1.78 billion.
That's a lot of money.
And since it's an antitrust case, it's tripled. So what I can tell you is the National Association of Realtors does not have $1.78 billion, let alone $5.4 billion. We would have had to post a bond. And I don't know if we had to post up to a $5.4 billion bond, we wouldn't have been able to. That would have led us into bankruptcy. Chapter 11 bankruptcy, which would stay all other cases for the National Association of Realtors across the country, the copycat cases, but the other defendants would continue on. And so, the Chapter 11 bankruptcy was just something that it just didn't seem like the right thing to do because we'd still be leaving our members out and on the hook during the appeal period. And then the other piece of that is with bankruptcy comes, it's not a good thing. I do believe that we would have lost some of our ability to lobby on behalf of our members and America's property owners, not only in Washington, D.C., but across the country in the different state capitals and towns and cities across the country.
And I can say from a state association perspective, Arizona is one of those states that had a copycat class action antitrust lawsuit that was filed against us. And so we're grateful for the settlement because the settlement, if it's approved by the court, will put an end to that case without our state association having to pay any money to the plaintiffs. So I think that's one of the benefits that you're referring to, and I know that we felt it here in Arizona.
Yeah, for sure. All local associations, state and territory associations, and association-owned MLSs will be protected in the settlement, as well as well over 1 million of our members. Right. In fact, I think the number is close to 1.4 million. Unfortunately, Berkshire Hathaway Home Services, who's the final defendant in the case, them and their affiliated companies are not part of the settlement, and so they were excluded out. And then there was another carve out by the plaintiffs, and that was for brokerages that had over $2 billion in sales in 2022, and there were approximately 96 of them. All of the members of those brokerages, independent contractor, realtor members, are protected by the settlement. It's just the corporate entities that were carved out.
Got it.
And leading into that, Kevin, we know that despite NAR's best efforts, that some of those large brokerages were left out. So we wanted you to talk a little bit more about that. How are they going to proceed on?
Yeah, there was no perfect option for us. If there was, we would have found it. There are two key things that we were able to negotiate into the settlement for the brokerages that were carved out and the non-association owned MLSs, that they can opt into the settlement one of two ways. There is a formula that's built right in. They can just use the formula and come up with a number, or they can go through non-binding mediation. And so that would give them the opportunity to work with the plaintiffs to see if they could come to an agreement through mediation on a dollar amount that would be acceptable to both parties. It's very unfortunate, but given the fact that we had some corporate settlements prior to the National Association of Realtors settling, that kind of led the plaintiffs into saying, okay, we need to get some more money for the class, and that's who they were looking at, or the large corporate brokers.
No, that makes sense.
And one of the big practice changes as a result of this settlement is cooperative compensation will no longer be offered through the multiple listing service. Now, we're very grateful that NAR was able to maintain cooperative compensation. That's a very important part of our practice. But I think, at least in my opinion, having the cooperative compensation on the multiple listing service adds transparency to a transaction. So how and why was that term included into the settlement agreement?
Yeah, so I agree with you that when it's clearly published and there's a unilateral offer of compensation, it is very transparent. Unfortunately, on February 15th, the Department of Justice weighed in on the case in Massachusetts against MLS PIN, the Noslak case. And the Department of Justice actually wanted to go a step further, wanted to completely eliminate offers of cooperating compensation. And they even floated the idea of potentially saying buyer representatives should charge by the hour. Now, we know that everything is negotiable, and you can determine the fee that you want to get paid and how you want to get paid, and you communicate that clearly with the consumer. Okay, that's fine. But the fact that the consumers still have choice and can offer the cooperating compensation, we do see that as a win. We're going to have to navigate through this, right? Figure out how to, as efficiently as possible, communicate the offers of compensation. And so, one of the things, and Scott, you talked about this when we were in Jackson, Wyoming. I held up my phone and said, we as realtors are going to have to start using this again, not just for games or text messages, but calling and having the conversation with the other agent. So one other good piece of news is if your company gets an IDX feed from the MLS, you can post on your own company website if there are offers of compensation for your listings. So that would be a way for consumers and other agents to be able to see if there is an offer if you choose to put that on your own website. So
that's a great thing. And one of the things I know, and as a buyer's agent, and I'm from an area where there's a lot of VA, how's that going to affect our buyers, and what does NAR feel on that, and what are their...
Yeah. So we definitely know that there are going to be some groups that this is going to be a little more challenging for. First-time home buyers, the brown and black community. We're hearing from folks that are very concerned about some of the minority buyers that may be harmed, and then the veterans. And so what I do know, and I don't know about Arizona, I don't know if Arizona is this, but there are 18 states across the country that currently have buyer rep contracts as a matter of law. And so I know in those 18 states, they are representing veteran buyers, right? In the old way with cooperating compensation on the MLS. But now it's just going to be having the conversation with the veteran. We know the veterans can't pay any additional fees. We know that, and so that's going to have to be negotiated in as part of any offer or purchase contract. And hopefully the selling consumer will still be willing and able to make the offer of cooperating compensation, so that we can honor our veterans and give them the ability to achieve the American dream of home ownership.
Yeah, I think that's important.
And I understand that NAR has proactively reached out to the VA and had conversations with the VA about this issue. Can you talk a little bit about the nature of those discussions?
Yeah, we're definitely having conversations with the VA. We're asking them to look at their rules again and see if there's any room for modifying the rules. So we've had discussions with them. And recently, I actually, within the last couple of weeks, got a letter from HUD. And HUD specifically said in the letter that if there are interested party contributions, IPCs, cooperating compensation would not be considered an interested party contribution. So it would be outside of the limit that's allowed for seller concessions to the buyer. So long as it is the normal course of business, which in all markets, it is a normal course of business. So that's good news that we got the ruling from HUD.
Yeah, no, I think that's very important for our industry. You mentioned the Department of Justice previously, so I did want to circle back to that, right? Because we know that the National Association of Realtors entered into a settlement agreement with the Department of Justice, and then really what was an unprecedented move, the Department of Justice withdrew from that settlement, and now we know the Department of Justice has court approval to move forward with its investigation. So a two-part question. What does that mean for realtors? And then does it have anything to do, or will it impact the settlement in the Sitzer-Burnett case?
Yeah, so I'll answer the second question first. That decision by the D.C. Circuit Court, the three-judge panel, will have no impact on our proposed settlement in the Sitzer-Burnett case. So that's that. And then the decision that was made was that, yes, the Department of Justice could reopen an investigation on matters that we believed were closed. It's very frustrating to me that the government is, based on this decision by the Circuit Court, the government can renege on contracts.
Yeah, especially when the lower level court decision was just so very clear and said the government has to abide by its contracts just like private parties do.
Right. So we're analyzing all options with regards to that decision by the D.C. Circuit Court. And at the end of the day, what they were looking to investigate with the rules changes that we're talking about with the cooperating compensation coming off the MLS and the written agreement when you're working with a buyer, those will address many of the concerns from the previous investigation. What will they look at next? Your guess is as good as mine.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
So, Kevin, you're president of NAR.
Yes.
You're a practitioner. You're like me. You're out in the field. You're out in the trenches every day, listing, selling homes. So how is this going to affect your business, do you think? And how are buyers and buyers agents going to be asking for that broker compensation or that compensation?
Yeah. So you've heard me say this before, Shelley. I wake up unemployed every morning, just like you, right? And on a daily basis, working with buyers, sellers, tenants, and landlords. Actually, though, I'm not working with buyers as much anymore because of the official duties as president of the National Association of Realtors. I'm on the road a lot, and so if I'm not home, I don't feel I can truly represent buyers. With that said, I have been able to a little bit. I've got a listing. I'm going to be sending out a contract on Sunday for a listing. So yes, I am a practitioner. But what I'll tell you is the most recent buyer that I worked with in December, a high school friend of mine, I helped he and his wife sell some houses, buy other houses and everything. Unfortunately, he was getting a divorce, and he says, Kevin, I need to move out. I need to find a new house. I said, okay. So I met with him. In Massachusetts, we are not required by law to have a buyer-broker contract. But I said, okay, just knowing what's coming down the pike, I sat down with him in my buyer consult, and it was the very first time that I had a consumer sign a buyer-broker contract. And so an old dog did learn new tricks. But what I'll say is, as I went through and explained all the services that would be provided to him, which I would normally do anyways, but this is the extra piece that said, and this is the amount that I'm looking to get paid. And so I said, on the MLS right now, there are offers. I showed him where he'd be able to see what the offer of compensation was, but I said, if the offer of compensation is less than what's on the contract, then you're agreeing that you will be paying me the difference. And so at the end of it, he says, where do I sign? That makes perfect sense. So yeah, we are going to have to make some practice changes and adjustments, but I think it's just doing it for the first time will be the hardest, and then it gets easier having those conversations. And I touched on the written contract or the written agreement with the buyer earlier. And at the end of the day, I'm a firm believer, every opportunity we have to sit down with a consumer to talk about the value we bring to a transaction, everybody's going to be better off. And so this is just another opportunity for us to have that conversation.
Totally agree. Totally agree.
And it sounds like your friend very clearly saw the value of a buyer broker. And we know, I mean, we see survey after survey that buyers want representation in their transactions, right? These are the largest, most complicated purchases of their lives. They don't want to go it alone.
Yeah, you know, I came in here to Phoenix from San Diego. I was there for NAR's Broker Summit, and Dr. Lawrence Yoon, our chief economist, he had a slide, and it showed that over 90% of consumers would use their realtor again or would recommend them to a friend. So yes, the general public really does appreciate what we bring to the transaction.
Before I let you off the hot seat, one of the complaints that we get from our members, and something that's been so frustrating, and I'm sure it's been frustrating to you, are these incessant false, misleading headlines, right, that misrepresent the nature of our industry, misrepresent realtor compensation. What is NAR doing to combat those headlines and really just to make sure that the truth gets told?
Yeah, it's very, very frustrating, and I don't know if it's just lazy journalism or if it's intentional misinformation being spread. And it all starts with the first article that had the wrong information, and then it just snowballed from there. But what we're doing is we've been having meetings with hundreds of media outlets since the announcement on March 15th of the settlement. And we are correcting the information. The problem is the correction is usually on page 4 down in the corner. It's not the headline, and so that's the toughest thing. But we are constantly having communications with them, sending out information, setting the record straight. But one of the other things that we've also done is we're asking our members across the country to help be media surrogates for us with the local media, and talk with the local media, talk with elected officials, regulators, anybody that will listen about the value that we bring in telling their story and their consumer's story, their customer, their client's story. And because the local media knows that we go to the PTO meetings, we're on the sidelines at the Little League fields, we're donating our time in the soup kitchen and helping with the Habitat for Humanity build. Our local media knows that, but we still have to remind them of that sometimes, of the good that we do, how we are not only realtors, but we're members of the community. And yeah.
That we are.
And you mentioned the media surrogates. I can tell you that our communications director here at AAR very much appreciates those routine meetings that NAR is having to give us information that we can then help disseminate on behalf of all realtors. So thank you for that.
Awesome, thank you.
And thanks for being here. I know you're traveling more than you're at home, and your schedule is incredibly busy, and the fact that you carved out some time to come and to meet with me and Shelley and have this conversation really is very much appreciated. So thank you,
My
Kevin.
pleasure. Thank you, Scott.
Absolutely.
And it's
Thank you,
great
Shelley.
for our members too to hear from you and to know that you're right in the thick of it with us.
Yeah, well, and I'll just share with you one of the things that was really frustrating last fall was that there was a void on the communications, right? And unfortunately, when there's a void or a vacuum, it gets filled, right? And I wasn't all too happy with what it was being filled with. And so on January 8th, when I became president, I asked our team, I said, look, we need to communicate more, we need to communicate better with the members. And that's why I'm happy doing this type of sit down with you, but we're also doing the on the road videos just to stay in touch with the members, let them know what's going on and what myself and the leadership team are doing for our 1.55 million members.
And I think that's so important. As Scott knows, one of my goals this year is the same thing in a state level, to make sure the members know we're here working on their behalf.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
We appreciate
That's great.
you, and we appreciate your leadership team. Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks, Scott.
Thanks,
All right,
Kevin.
Shelley.